right, everyone, welcome back to another episode. Today I have, I would say, good friend Derek Loudermilk here. So welcome to the show, man.
Hey Tyler, good to see you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, man. What that actually let that be the first question before you do your intro is there like when do we stop saying Happy New Year? Like what day? Is there like a rule on that? I don't know. Just curious. Is
It
there
still feels like New Year, but I learned recently that so we have the Gregorian calendar, right? New Year's happens January 1st, but before the Gregorian calendar, before Pope Gregory made that calendar, New Year's was April 1st. And so they put this April Fool's Day in where New Year's used to be, and now New Year's is kind of, I don't know. So it hasn't always been that way.
interesting? Wow, that is not the answer I was expecting, but I'm glad I asked because I didn't know. That's weird. I'm gonna look into that. Okay, so before we go any deeper, tell the audience just a little bit more about you, what you got going on.
Yeah, so Tyler and I met a decade ago. You came on my show about your conference crushing book, and then I was in your Better Business book, and then you advised me on the Activate Your Life series, and we just finished publishing volume 4. So that's similar idea. I just took your idea and applied it to coaches and healers and spiritual teachers. So we just published the 4th volume, and it's getting more and more metaphysical, more spiritual, more healing related. At first, it was a lot of coaches, and so each volume has its own flavor. And this was our biggest launch ever, which is super cool. And each book sort of seems to address what is needed in the world at the time that it's released. It's very interesting to observe, what people bring forth, because the chapters we have in the book are exercises that these coaches and trainers and healers have perfected with their clients and their work over the years. So the other cool thing is that now I have this sort of catalog. As I go through the chapters, I have 100 or more different exercises. So if I run a retreat, I can just fill it up with all these activities that I've learned from these experts around the world. So basically, I could run a 7-day retreat at the drop of a hat because I know so many different workshops and exercises at this point.
That is awesome. So would you say this book series, as far as like I guess business goes, is this kind of the core thing that you do, and then things like that's the foundation, and then things kind of come from that, or just
Now, this is
curious?
just a weird project that I do from time to time.
Oh, okay, got it.
Yeah, yeah, I work with a lot of the types of people that we have in the book,
Okay,
because I'm a quantum business coach, which is applied metaphysics for entrepreneurs. So basically, or applied enlightenment, basically, taking all these esoteric and spiritual skill sets and applying them to people that have a mission, an organization, a project that they want to get into the world. And this is something, so I go and learn these techniques, and then I test them out with my clients. I see what works for practical applications here in the 3D world. So it's fun. I'm like a scientist and a business coach and spiritual entrepreneur all in one.
got it. So that, not saying solely, but that's part of what fuels this like incredible curiosity that you have. We were talking about that before I hit record. So that makes sense. Okay. So because you said this before the recording, before we get to that, I mean, with you, there's so many interesting topics, but this is the one that struck me the most for some reason. Tell us a little bit more about what we were talking about before with like the money system, and basically how the government and the banks give you all the money in the world and create freedom for everybody. Tell us more about that.
Okay, so this is like I've spent the last 6 months and hundreds of hours researching this stuff, but the super basic outline is that there's something called a straw man, which is it's an entity that's created. It's basically a trust that has the same name as you, which is created with your birth certificate and your social security number, and it allows that trust to interact in the corporate world. So trust can only interact with trusts. So it allows you to interact with banks, financial institutions. It's that entity that gets mortgages and car loans and credit cards and phone bills and utility bills and all that stuff. Those are all in the name of the trust, which is Tyler Wagner, but it's in all caps. And then you are a living man, and you have the same name, but it's capital first letter, lowercase rest of your name. So they're very often confused by most people who haven't looked into this. But basically, one is public, this trust that interacts with the corporate, commercial, trade world, the government world. And then there's private, that's you as a living person that interacts as a living man would. But a lot of people never know, until probably recently, I think a lot more people are learning about this, that there's two separate entities and you need to know how to use each one.
Got it. Okay. So wait, because that's like a cliffhanger there. Tell us, like, and without making this the entire show, because I'm sure we could talk for like 10 hours about this one topic, but how, from your learnings, I guess, how could one benefit from learning this stuff and then leveraging it? I think that would be, that's a good.
Yeah. Yeah. So because all of the, again, mortgages and bills, et cetera, are in the name of this trust, the trust is the one responsible for processing those interactions, those payments, and any debts that it has. So a lot of people get really afraid of the bills and the money that they think they owe, but the whole thing is actually flipped. And as you begin to learn about this, so that the reason it's flipped is because back in 1933, the United States was bankrupt. And in order to restructure the bankruptcy, same thing happens when a person restructures their debt in bankruptcy. They needed to put forth collateral so they could continue getting money from the Federal Reserve Bank. And the collateral they put forth was essentially a mortgage on all the labor, all the life force energy, essentially, of Americans. So that was the collateral. So we put that up as collateral, and in return, we basically get access to infinite money. All the debts are now the responsibility of the government. They're the obligations of the government. And if you look on for example, a Federal Reserve note, one of your green notes that you carry around in your billfold, that is a debt note. That is basically a promise to pay. So that's not actual money. It's totally different than money. You look up the definition of money and you look up the definition of currency, and a note is a promise to pay. It's a type of currency, and that's what funds are, runs the economy, but there's no money in the economy anymore. Money is gold, silver, and minerals. So the legal and banking definition of money is separate from the currency that we're using. It's all fake, basically.
Yeah.
And so that's why it takes the living man or woman, right? Because we're mortgaged, we're the collateral. So we're the only ones that can actually give life to the currency. So all currency, all fiat currency flows through us. When you go to get a mortgage for your house, that money is created when you sign the mortgage. And then, so you sign the mortgage, the bank takes that mortgage to the Federal Reserve, the Treasury, gets cash for it, and then lends you that cash. So you create the money first, and then the bank lends it to you.
Yeah.
So if you know what you're doing, because you've already paid the debt, right? You've already issued them the cash up front that they then lent back to you. So if you know what you're doing, you can discharge that debt through the proper legal process because you've already paid for it.
Yeah, wow. You explain that better than anybody I've ever heard because you hear people like Robert Kiyosaki and actually a lot of people that are in real estate and have used debt to get wealthy. Those are the ones that normally are the ones talking the most about fiat currency and how it's all fake, it's not real, gold, silver, Bitcoin. So, but they've never explained it like that. And that actually really shows the proof of like how fake it is. That was pretty eye-opening. That's wild. Um, what are your just because we're on this topic, like, do you have any thoughts on like Bitcoin crypto? Like, you think that's a thing or gold, silver, minerals only?
I think, I mean, there's an explanation about crypto, about Bitcoin specifically being a perfected ledger, which is super useful. And so all of these coins and tokens and blockchains have great use cases. Gold and silver, not only are there material applications, a lot of people don't understand why gold is valuable. Like they understand that it's kind of rare, but it's not the rarest. And it's shiny, it's used for jewelry, and it's a good conductor. But like, why is it actually valuable? People don't know what gold can actually do. It's one of the most powerful tools in the universe. It has the metaphysical properties that I don't begin to really understand, but it can take you anywhere in the universe. It can help you open portals. It can amplify your intention. So there's a lot. So the reason that humans are so fascinated with gold is because higher dimensional beings are valuing gold. And we have that kind of like built into our psyche that gold is really valuable and important because of its useful properties that go beyond an exchange of value. We just happen to make it money because it's so useful for other applications.
Got it. Wow, yeah. I don't think anybody so you don't, I mean, you know some of the values of it, but you said you don't know necessarily like all of them, right? Of what gold because that's interesting. Like I didn't know like the portals or that stuff. So, and I actually have I think I have thought about that before where I'm like, what is it about gold that everybody likes so much? Like I understand the jewelry and all that, but like why did we choose that? Like out of everything. So, do you know maybe the core reason we chose that, or is it more like it's a group or a number of things, and it just kind of added up to be that like, hey, this has 1,000 incredible properties. All these other things over here are just shiny rocks. Well, not just shiny rocks, but in comparison, you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, silver has also properties in addition to its, physical
Yeah.
uses. It's and again, I'm like aware of that there are these properties of gold, and the two that I sort of know about are the immortality property that has to do with how it affects biological systems and the interdimensional and the space travel element of it. But I'm sure there's a lot more.
Hmm. Trump
Yeah.
likes gold a lot. He has or he has gold everywhere. So I wonder.
Yeah, well,
Well,
Trump, I think, has several extra dimensional and extraterrestrial species advising him.
really? Oh, you got to tell me more about that. This is a clip. Come on. Why do you think that?
Uh, from multiple sources, I think that at least the Pleiadians, but probably like multiple members of the Galactic Federation are meeting, that he has met with them. And he's got very specific, I mean, he's such a unique person, right? He's like
Mm,
a wrench in everybody's plans. He's a he's a great disruptor, right? And that's his role basically, is to shake things up. And that's very useful for people with specific agendas, right? If you need old systems to go away, you need a domino that can begin to have those systems decay and become replaced by new systems. So that's how I see Trump's role. And of course, he's going to ruffle a lot of feathers. Um, but yeah, I think they see him as an asset, essentially.
interesting. So just before we move to the next topic, and we don't need to make this all about Trump, but you said the Palladians and what was the other one? That's what I'm more curious about. Like I actually haven't heard that term before.
Okay, the Pleiadians are a race of humanoid extraterrestrials.
Okay.
that perhaps have been the most involved with Earth and Earth humans throughout history. They're mentioned in the Bible. They've been here for at least 300,000 years, uh, seeding life in different forms, responsible for this Earth plane experiment to some degree. And the Pleiadians are one of the key members of the, you know how there's United Nations Security Council,
Hmm.
and it's like 8 or 10 member nations or something. The Pleiadians would be one of those on the Galactic Federation Security Council. So there's probably, again, like, hundreds of races represented, but the main council would be Pleiadians, Arcturians, Sirians, Lyrans, um, perhaps Zeta Reticuli, uh, perhaps Mantis beings. And these are all physical, non-physical, higher dimensional. Some of them live on planets, some of them live without bodies, but they all collectively are trying to guide the evolution of Earth, and because Earth is very important for the whole universe.
Hmm. Wow, this is interesting, dude. From 10 years, I can't help but think from 10 years ago when I met you, you were always cool, but like you're really cool now for real. Like, seriously.
Yes, I made
Like
it.
I'm not like fucking around. That's awesome. Um, okay. So and okay, and then by having conversations with them, it's time travel or whatever you want to call it, but he's obviously gaining an advantage off others that are not having those interactions, I would
Yeah,
think.
Trump is probably learning a lot. He's probably getting a lot of intelligence from the Galactic Federation. Yeah.
Got it.
But he's also, he's the type of person that's probably bound a lot by his own belief structures. So as much as he might be open to that, he's still just going to do the things that his personality forced him to be a certain way, right? So even if he wanted to be a better leader, I'm not sure that he could fit that, because that's
Mhm.
not really his blueprint, you know?
And is that basically what you would call like kind of the ego in a sense? Like he's so involved with himself that although he's having the interactions, he can't really use them at the level that maybe another person could that is more open to that and less out of themselves. If that made any
Yeah,
sense.
he's always going to be caught up by his own, yeah, 3D egoic concerns for
Yeah.
sure.
Got it. Okay. In part two, we'll talk more about that. So I'll leave it
Sure.
for
Yeah.
now. So on this list that you sent me before, one of the things that stood out first is clairvoyance that I want to talk about because I've seen on I forget what show it was, but I've seen on actually it's probably a couple different shows like clairvoyance, and somehow, they're basically able to like read your mind and do all these things. So what is well, first, can you tell people what a clairvoyant is? Because I actually couldn't even give a definition if I had to.
Take a guess.
So, okay. Somebody, hmm, somebody who's like tapped into the universal energy field and can basically see what's going to happen before it happens because they're so tapped into that field. It's probably worded way better than that. If it,
Yeah, that's great. That's pretty close. There's a lot of clairs. There's clairvoyance, which is clear sight, and there's clairsentience, which is just knowing. That's your inner knowing. There's clairaudience, is where you get verbal guidance delivered to you. And so each person has probably a predominant one of these extra sensory perceptions. And they often line up with how you prefer to perceive in your physical body. So if you have a really strong sense of smell, or if you like to hear, or if you're very visual, for me, I get it as movies. So I get my non-physical information as movies, largely, sometimes smells and sometimes words, but mostly
Mhm.
movies. So that's clairvoyant. And what's happening here is you may be familiar with the term quantum entanglement.
No, I'm not. Quantum, yes, but not the entanglement part.
Quantum entanglement, basically, there's experiments that where they came up with this. Basically, like you can spin a photon or a particle here, and another particle that's entangled with it will react the same way anywhere in space and time. And they've basically found that the whole universe is entangled with itself. So there's no way to do anything without affecting the whole. And we we have access to the information field, which is sort of before there's a physical, there's the information field of everything. The physical world, the solid thing that makes up our bodies and this computer and whatnot, that's kind of a byproduct. That's kind of downstream of the information field, or you could call it God, right? The mind of God exists before the physical world exists. And so what you're doing is you're moving your attention from the physical senses to the non-physical, and you're getting the information processed through the senses in a way, but non-physical information. So it's also non-local. So it's not tied to your physical brain. It's not tied to your physical body. And there's a lot of different ways that they've studied this. There's the US government started studying this when in the Cold War, when the Russians had a psychic spy program. So the US got a psychic spy program, and they started studying what's called remote viewing, where they would look at Russian military bases and installation and try to gather intel as an intelligence operation, just sitting in a room and projecting one's consciousness to remote locations. So they validated a process by which you get into a certain state, and then you want to do it blind so that you're not prejudicing the information. So they'll just give you a coordinates, like go to these coordinates, remote view them, tell us what you see. And so you'll give a first impressions, and then you'll sketch out, are there any buildings, are there any people, is it outdoors, indoors, what's going on at this location, how does it feel, is there any particular emotion happening at this place or time and space? And so you start to fill in the details of the picture of what you're seeing. Now that can be verified. You can actually go there and check it out. So it's a great process for training. So you can go through and train viewers to be more and more accurate until they have a 97, 99% accuracy rating. Then you can use that for gathering intel, where you couldn't use a satellite, you couldn't use agents on the ground, but you can add in a remote viewer to corroborate the data you're getting from these other intel sources. So that was kind of the military application. At the same time, there's people with a family genetic lineage that enables them to be psychics, mediums, clairvoyants, etc. Right? The witches. They were probably just tapping into their natural. This is all part of the natural human abilities. They've just been suppressed for millennia because the people that are in control don't like it when you have superpowers. So they try to make people afraid to use them. That's really why the witch trials happened and the Inquisition and all that stuff. But so there is a genetic component. Some people are more gifted naturally than others. It happens much easier, but more and more people are telling me, I'm realizing that I'm telepathic. I'm realizing that I'm clairvoyant. I posted on social media something like, you might know you're telepathic when you go to the grocery store and you start to have thoughts about foods that you never would like, or thoughts about the other people in the store that you never would have. It's just like you're tuning into the radio dial of the other people in the store. And more people are having that experience of like, I think I'm hearing someone else's thoughts next to me. So the natural abilities of humans are coming to the surface because the suppression of those abilities has been removed, essentially.
Wow, I have a lot of questions now. Okay. So wait, let's go here first. So the witch trials, because when you said that, I think you called it an epiphany or something. I had something there. It was like,
Hmm.
so did they come up with the term witch to basically make it a bad thing if you're able to have these abilities? Like that word was used to make these superpowers that we have seem like they're witchcraft and all for negative, do you think?
Yeah, and I don't know too much about there's probably like a knowledge lineage which is witchcraft. Like it's part of probably like an ancient tradition of wisdom. But yeah, I think the so any power that wants to control the masses uses basically the same tools of, fear and divide and conquer, getting people to turn against each other, right? If you look at any of these totalitarian dictatorships, they use the same propaganda tools that have been used throughout time. They're tried and tested. And you definitely don't want, if you're going to be in control of a large group of people, you don't want anybody to think differently than your agenda. You don't want anybody to, again, have special powers and uh, be free to use them essentially. So there's campaigns to control, especially those types of people, uh, as a lesson to people that are maybe more fearful.
Got it. Um, so this is maybe a little curveball question, but I want to get it out. So, um, based because as I was reading through this list that you sent over, is like a question for you because it seems like you have a lot of knowledge on a lot of these different things. So, from 10 years ago, you probably had like an idea of like what the world was, what Earth is, like what we're all doing here. And now, 10 years later, I'm sure that that has changed dramatically. Like, what do you what do you think is actually going on? It's the biggest question in the world, I guess.
Well,
But I
so
feel
when
like
you and I met, um, when you and I met, I was just finishing grad school, trained as a scientist, and probably a lot of scientists still have this uh, materialism. So like the material world is first, and then the like mind is a byproduct of that. And in those 10 years, it's it's flipped for me. So consciousness is primary and the material world is a byproduct of that. And so there's a lot of implications for that. Um, but for example, one of those things on that list is the map of consciousness. So because I have an inquiring mind, a scientific background, not only do I do a lot of experiments, but I try to build models of understanding. And there's essentially, I'll give you the map of consciousness is really great because it sort of explains like who are we as Earth humans. There's these different densities of consciousness. So you've got God, you put him at the top, universal, all-knowing source of everything, and then there's layers as the frequency of light, of that source light, begins to densify and densify. You get into different layers, and eventually in the third density, and we're in the third dimension, you get physical beings, and we are like a fractal of God. So it's a holographic universe. Everything in the universe is within inside us, but we are just a sliver of that whole. So the reason to have bodies and incarnations and fractalizations of God is so that the universe or God can perceive itself from an infinite number of perspectives. So it's as curious about itself as we are. And so our role here as humans is to grow and evolve and learn and basically be of service to other beings which are growing, evolving, and learning. That's basically the role that we have as humans here on the planet. Because we're like a representative, we're a small sliver of the totality of the universe.
Mm. I just thought this is just to be funny that if somebody like took some mushrooms and listened to this interview, they'd have a great time. Like it would be absolutely
They would be
incredible.
like, "Yep, I know that. I'm living it
Yeah,
right now."
I know. Yeah, exactly. And they don't have to take mushrooms to enjoy it, but I just thought if they were, the like aha moments would just be so much grander. Like they're like, holy shit. So that would be incredible. Um, okay, so
And
my question, yeah.
mushrooms and psychedelics in general are those are doorways. So the journey isn't um, the physical substances that are within the plants. Those are the keys. Those are the keys to the doorways. And then when you ingest them, it allows you to step through the doorway, and you're basically moving into a different part of the universe,
Mhm.
different dimensions of the universe. And then you meet beings, and you have experiences, and you learn things, and you get insights, and then you have to basically reintegrate all the pieces of you which have shot across the universe. You have to bring them all back to this so that you're whole again when you come back. That's why you have to have a guide when you do these things, because if you make a mistake and you don't put yourself back together properly, uh, you could die. So you need to have someone to help put you back together if you don't have that skill yourself, and it takes practice to have that skill.
Yeah, on that, yeah, I totally agree. Like I really want to try DMT really bad, and I still haven't yet. And if I did, I would totally want to do it with like a guide, and I wouldn't feel comfortable otherwise. And it's weird how like when I was younger, I did mushrooms a decent amount of times. Always pretty much always had a great time. But then as I got older, like I had one terrible trip and I'm just terrified of it now. Like, and yeah, it was like I think I did die. Like yeah, I felt like I died and I had to accept it because I couldn't get out of it. And then once the trip ended, I was okay, but there was some damage done for sure. Like there was definitely damage. Um, and if I had a guide when I did it, working through that whatever mental thing I was going through at the time, would have been I'm sure it just would have been different, would have been easier.
Well, what I'm
Um,
talking about, just to be clear, is
yeah.
not a therapist or a counselor or someone like that that
Yeah.
can make you feel safe. It's someone that can actually see the pieces of your body as they're reintegrating and make sure they come back together properly. I don't have that ability.
Mm.
So it takes someone with a lot of power to be able to see, right, your dispersed essence coming back together to make sure all the pieces fit properly.
Is that like that just made me think. So when people go to do like ayahuasca, sometimes and maybe it's all the time. I don't have any experience with it personally, but I've heard and seen documentaries where the shaman also takes the ayahuasca. And some people that have never gone would think that's like crazy. They're like, well, how can you monitor this person if you're on it too? But maybe what you're saying there is like, that's how they also tap in and make sure those pieces come back together. Is that kind of it or no?
Yeah, the shamans that are taking the ayahuasca are like the they're good at what they do, but the once you once you have enough experience, you wouldn't need the physical ingestion anymore.
Okay.
You would just tune into that frequency without any ingestion. So it's really just a training tool for 20 years or something until you can do it without.
Got it. Okay. That makes sense. Um, I had a really good question and I lost it because we were going down this path. So something else. I hate when that happens because I have like 20 different things that I want to ask you, and then I'm like ordering them as you're talking. And then I lost the big one. It's so depressing. Well, here, let's because this was actually recent. This happened in Miami. Did you hear about the thing in Miami with the alien thing?
Yeah, that's why I wanted to ask you why you did that.
Oh my God, that's good. Yeah,
I
no,
know it was you.
um No, but dude, I got a ton of texts because yeah, I was there and I still kind of bounce back and forth, but right now I'm down in Colombia. But like, I don't know, probably like 20, 30 texts from friends, and they're like, dude, did you see the news? Like there's an alien. Like, so I don't, besides what happened there, whether it's real or not, the fact that there was all those cops is kind of strange. And then they said that it was because of like a teenage fight, I think I heard, but I don't know why that would pull, 500 cops. So
Yeah.
regardless if it was real or not, I'm curious what you think. But what was the guy's name that came out about the UFOs and stuff? I can't remember his name now. He was like a whistleblower on it. But your thoughts are based on the earlier part of the conversation. Obviously, you would believe that there's aliens and stuff, and that we are communicating with them. But like, what is the? I guess the question is like, what do you think the extent of it is? And obviously, nobody really knows how. But is this just like scratching the surface, like aliens, or is there like you think there's like a absolute shit ton of other living things out there? You know, I guess does that question make sense?
Yeah. So I have an explanation that it feels the most probable to me about the Miami event.
Okay.
And um, last time I was on, I think we talked about CE5. So that's Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, where you can physically request ETs to come and visit you. And a lot of times they're not like a metal saucer, they're globes of light or telepathic communication or observed in different light spectrum or X-ray spectrum. So you have to have like an expanded set of instruments to be able to detect the crafts when they come. They're not always just visual. And so there's a lot happening on frequencies that we're not perceiving. And so my understanding is that there's a lot of the scientific teams of the Galactic Federation have permission to be here observing Earth humans. And typically, because of our density, our level of frequency, we're not able to see them. They're higher frequential beings and they keep themselves in a high frequency.
Mm-hmm.
And but I believe we were undergoing a series of X-class solar flares over the 31st, 1st, and 2nd. And what that can do is that can sort of blast away some of the density, so to speak, and have people perceiving in an elevated level of density. It's almost the same mechanism that allows people to be more telepathic. But what I think happened was that it was a team of observers, interdimensional beings that are probably scientific observation teams. They were at the mall to observe humans, and then they realized that some of the humans could see them. And those humans were freaked out, right? They were like, what the fuck, right? When you see 8 foot tall, 10 foot tall beings there in the mall, you would probably run and scream. And then probably most of the turmoil was from people just being afraid of the people who are afraid, right? They're like, I don't know what's happening, but I'm just going to run. So it caused this domino effect of fear and surprise. And then there were some instances of people saying like shadowy figures, like blurry, shadowy, couldn't quite make out the physicality. Those are people who are perceiving somewhere in between the spectrum. So they can't quite tell that they're physical beings, but you can perceive that there's something there, like a shadow or a wisp. Um, and so it's just really like different levels of human perception, finally seeing what's really there. So there's a lot of elves, sprites,
Elves.
nymphs, dragons, leprechauns, yetis. All of these things are interdimensional beings that sometimes choose to change their frequency to be seen, but most of the time they're outside of the frequency of our perception.
Yes, unless what we decide and are able through medicinal, or I guess if you're after many years of training, non-medicinal, you can take, because I've heard stories of that with like ayahuasca and DMT. It's always the elves. So it's kind of, Alex Jones was talking about this. I like Alex
Hmm.
Jones. I don't care what anybody says. I think he's cool. um, so he and congrats to him being back on X or Twitter. It's awesome. But I think that he was saying that like a bunch of people that have taken, it was one or the other or both, ayahuasca, DMT. I think they're actually somewhat similar of medicine. But they all see these elves. So he's like, if they're all seeing like the same thing, then you would probably conclude that it is actually something that's there, like it's not that all of our brains are, um, like it's not that we're all the same, it's that what we're looking at is the same, if that makes sense. I mean, we all are the same in some respect, but is that adding up? Like I've heard that
Yeah,
story.
yeah. I think people might see that as like where you're going somewhere else to another destination. And those elves exist not on Earth, but wherever you're going. I think they probably are here also.
You're here. Yeah.
And, native peoples kind of know that, right? They know like, oh, that tree has a fairy that lives in it. And it's just kind of like, because sometimes you can interact with it and sometimes you can't. It depends on the arrangement of the heavenly bodies, as the planets and stars move, as the poles shift, as we wobble, like there's a different fields of energy and information that impact the surface of Earth. So you'll have different experiences. Sometimes you get aurora, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you get fairies, sometimes you don't.
Mm-hmm. So obviously we got to go to part two soon, but I want to, before we hop off on part one, I guess my next question for you is like, what do you see? When do you think, if, and maybe you don't know, but if you were to guess, like, when will this time come when maybe we start unveiling, I guess the words, these things more? Like, do you think our destiny as people on Earth with the powers of control that don't want us to have access to this stuff, like, do you think we will get to a point where we have like full access? Or do you think that they will win, I guess, and completely eliminate us from having it? And if you think we're going to have it, like when? Like 100 years, 500 years? Like,
I will say that I'm pretty sure that this is going to be the year 2024 where people say that was the year where everything changed for humanity.
okay.
And so we're going to have a major shift this year. It's going to be a big leap, and there will be more leaps in the future. And of course, timelines are fluid based on choices and free will. But yeah, this is an amazing. This is going to be like the best year ever, best year ever, totally.
Yeah.
And we're just gonna, whether it's like we're gonna see inside of all the systems, the banking system, the government system, the corporate system, the control religious system, whatever, whether we see that or we see more physical aliens, or we understand how we got here, or whatever it is, I think all that stuff is going to become way more apparent pretty soon this year, in the next few months.
That is awesome. Yeah, I'm excited for that. That is, that's wild. Um, all
So
right. Well,
everybody hang on to
yeah,
your
dude.
butts.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, it's things are gonna get wow. And it's so, I always just think, and we'll get on this part too, but I just think it's so weird that like how things kind of, I always wonder like how did we end up in a situation where like there are these people, like a small group, that, and I'm kind of going based on what Alex Jones says sometimes, is like there's a small group of people that are like ruling kind of everybody. Like we have free will to do things, but there's, laws and all these things, which I'm not saying laws are bad, but like, I just don't understand how it ended up that the majority is being ruled, like billions are being ruled by like thousands. How, I just don't get how that happened. Like, how did we let that happen?
It's the
So,
density. Is because we don't know who we are. We don't really know who we are. And that makes it easy to control.
yeah. And this probably too, I want to know what you, so if you believe in free will, Sam Harris, he says like there is no free will. So I'm curious, like, what
I
do
don't
you
like Sam Harris. He
think?
doesn't know.
Yeah.
I
Let's
mean,
leave
people
all
are
that.
entitled to whatever they want.
Yeah.
But like Earth is a special place because there's free will on Earth and there's not free will on most planets and in most dimensions. It's a special benefit we get here because there's maximum lessons that can be learned from choices. So it's a very special opportunity that we have to have free will here on Earth.
Mhm. All right. If there's anything else you want to share, please do. But if not, we'll leave anything else other than that for part two. So I'll
All
leave the,
right. Yeah, thanks, Tyler.
of course, nothing else like where the book is or anything. You want to share any
Oh, oh,
website?
yeah, yeah. DerekLoudermilk.com. Activate Your Life as a book. And we've got a telepathy course coming up in spring 2024, probably February. Should look for that.
That's another. Okay. We'll talk about that on the next one. All right. Thanks,
Okay.
brother. Appreciate you.
Yep. Thank you.